good brothers and sisters, welcome to another edition of Toy Guys Talking, and I'm talking to a good brother here, Jason Salamun.
Hello.
Very much for joining us, chatting with the tribe on YouTube as well as in podcast land. You are a ninja level supporter on Patreon, so thank you very much for supporting.
Oh, thank you.
Having fun on there?
You know, I love it, man. A lot of the reason why I decided to support you is kind of with everything going on in the world, and I upped my support just because I've been watching you more. I came across your videos looking at some ideas for a toy room or some sort of collection room when we moved to a new house, and I'm like, this guy is incredible. And I think whenever
You're embarrassing
someone's
me.
creating value for you and you're getting some entertainment out of it, I think it's only fair that we do our best to share. And so that's my way to say thank you and to get back to you for all that you do.
Well, I'm so flattered and humbled by that. When this whole thing hit, when this all came out, I immediately knew, I assumed, like, you know, that's going to probably take a dip as everyone is going to have to cinch up their belts a little bit. And I was very surprised to see new members coming in and people, staying and people increasing their pledges too. That really, really shocked me. And it means the world to me because when it happened, I figured, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not like a law enforcement person. And I don't work in a grocery store, and they are heroes. The people who are working in grocery stores, we're hearing about them. Like I was saying, they should get hazard pay. They're calling it hero pay, which is very fitting. So tip of the cap to everyone working in grocery stores and keeping us fed and nourished. But, so I didn't think I was anywhere near that level, but I knew that I had this laptop that has a camera on it, and I have the capability of doing live streams that a few people can watch. And so it's all about doing what you can. It's not about setting your sights on a certain goal. It's just about it's the Jon Snow line that I love from Game of Thrones. Do what you can, as long as you can. And so I've been jumping on the live streams, just, chatting with folks, and figured do what I can. And I've heard quite a few people just give appreciation for that. And, it really hits the heart. I'm glad it, helps, makes the days go by a little bit quicker. Certainly helps me too. And before we started rolling here, you were just saying this is all, it's tough, it's difficult, it's hard to adjust this quickly, but it's also an opportunity for people to show their quality, to use a Faramir'ism.
Yeah. I think when you started this, I'm sure it was for fun. This is a hobby, and it's got a lot of fun attached to it. And obviously in days like this, people are going through tough times. And so, however, I think distractions and sometimes getting our minds off of the things that are taking up space. And we know people are either sick or struggling. Maybe they're struggling financially, just maybe mentally, or with relationships, or just the stress and anxiety of everything. Every once in a while, I think it's really good that we do whatever we can to take a mental break from all that's going on. Doesn't mean you ignore it. You have to face your challenges. We always think we're trying to get around challenges, but really we should get through them. Yeah. And one thing that helps you get through challenges is giving yourself that mental break. And that's what's fun about this hobby. As I've been watching more and more of your videos lately, that compelled me to say, hey, I want to support this guy. This guy's doing good stuff. Obviously, many people on the front lines are doing amazing things. So it takes all of us doing our part, whether in our relationships or our hobbies or our work, whatever it is, to get through this. And we will. But it's good. It's good to have fun. It's good to talk. Good to chat about fun stuff. And that's what we're here to do today.
You are wise beyond your years, sir. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you while this stuff is going on. I feel like I've been saying it for years, right back to when I did that first tour video. It's not about what's on the shelves. It's about who is on the shelves. And I've tried to always stress the importance of the character. That's why when I talk about some of these classic characters, if there's a bio card, I'll read it, because I want to talk about why this character was special, and it's not just about what accessories he or she came with or what costume he or she came with. It's about how they react in certain situations. And that's what makes your character. Like most people on this planet are who they are, not just because of their DNA, but because of certain elements they've taken, picked and choosed from all different characters that they've encountered, either real people or fictional or historical. And they say it kind of, it's funny. Serpentor is one of those characters in GI Joe that there's a contingent that aren't a fan of Serpentor, right? I recognize that there's some who don't like Serpentor, but we're all Serpentor in a way. We all kind of picked and chose elements of a whole bunch of different people and characters and created our own deoxyribonucleic acid out of all of it, DNA. So that's, going back years, when I first started these videos, it just feels like, man, I'm glad I went with that theme because it's tough, but, I feel like I'm able to cope with it because of what I've been talking about, not just on the YouTube channel, but going back 35 years.
Yeah.
How Optimus Prime dealt in Megatron's master plan with being railroaded out of that competition and kicked off the planet. How did he deal with it? No, Ironhide, we must adhere to the law. Sense of honor and integrity. And then when he found out that it wasn't returned in kind, now, we will be avenged. But he had a certain list of like criteria that had to be satisfied before he started kicking butt. You can't just kick butt because you got to be
a code.
Yeah, a code, exactly. Going to Star Trek, Mr. Spock is a huge inspiration going through stuff like this. You got to be logical. When you say mental break, it's important to take that like mental vacation type of mental break, not the other type of mental break, not the Galvatron. Don't take the Galvatron mental break because again, we should learn from that season 3 of Transformers. That type of mental break, a psychotic break, it's not going to work in the long run. It's not really going to help you.
No, I think you touched on something really important, and I think that's what separates your channels from a lot of others that I see.
I wear a hat. That's what separates
you wear a hat.
me.
I'm wearing a hat today as well.
That's the only
Sunday
difference.
But what you understand is, growing up, I was a kid in the 80s, a teenager in the 90s. Growing up in the 80s and the things that you and I enjoy and we have in common are not just, as toys and things like that. It were stories.
Yeah.
We're talking about true stories with heroes and villains, and and a story is just a hero who wants something and is willing to overcome struggles to get it. And so when you learn about those things, you touch into the soul of what makes those things special. And so whether it's the movies from the 80s or the TV shows or the cartoons or professional wrestling, I was mentioning to you earlier, big fan of that growing up. It ties real deep into my childhood. But what connected me to them, and I realized this some time ago, was a lot of the things, the common thread are the stories, because life in many ways is a story. And when you understand that, who are you in stories? Who do you maybe identify with? Are you willing to overcome or go through really difficult challenges in order to make things better? So when you talked about Transformers, and Optimus Prime is a great example. G.I. Joe, which we both love, but even all of our favorite movies have that in common. As I know you've worked in film. When you understand that, then it makes those things special. And that's what makes it special to us, not only from our childhood, and that there's a part of that that's special because of our stories, but also those stories somehow connected with us. Yes, they were fun. Sometimes they're just blowing stuff up. But as you get older and you start thinking about it, you're like, that's pretty interesting. And it might be fun, might be funny, might be serious. But story and soul is what I love about the old stuff, the retro stuff. And it's the thing that I think hopefully moving forward, my kids and future generations will have stories that have soul to them. Because that's what I think I'm attracted to most. It's not just the things come and go. I love my collection here in my space. It's fun. And that's why I have it, but and it's art, like you've talked about. It's art, kind of makes you feel a certain way, but it reminds me of stories, and that's the good stuff.
Hmm. It's interesting. I never really picked up on that spirit, that soul, the morality of those old shows until the reboots started coming out. So I guess I just took it for granted. I always thought it was cool and fun, but I didn't realize until they banged out a few of those Michael Bay Transformers movies that I started to go, hey, something's missing here. And then the new He-Man, the 2002 He-Man, it was cool, but there was something missing from it, I thought. Not terrible by any stretch, but there was something missing from it. The G.I. Joe movies, something was off about those, and it wasn't just the costumes. So as more reboots come back, I start to go, there's this kind of intangible thing that you can't really put down on paper and say, include this ingredient.
Hmm.
The Thundercats reboot totally had it. So that's when I started to go, okay, it's spirit, it's soul, it's heart, it's morality, it's something selfless, something heroic, the heroic message. And I started to really see that it felt to me like a majority of things, the priority was to be cool. It was to be BA. And the minority of things were driven by spirit, fun, morality. Guys like Lou Scheimer, their mentality had their day had come and gone. The whole thing of what's your point? Don't the good guys win? Even talking about wrestling, since I'm a lifelong wrestling fan too, going back to JYD.
Oh yeah, I love
Um,
GID.
I've been reading Bob Backlund's book, so any wrestling fan, even if you're not a wrestling fan, if you really want a feel good story and to be inspired any day, but especially these days, Bob Backlund's book. Bob Backlund's book is so inspirational. That guy is a real life hero. He's, I think, 70, around there now, and he's just lived his life the same way with the same training and routine for so long, and it's working for him. He's just intense, he's passionate, he's happy.
Mm-hmm.
But in Bob Backlund's book, he talks about Vince McMahon's father, Vince Sr.,
Hmm.
and it was the exact same thing. So I'd always heard the stories about from the other wrestlers saying Bob Backlund wasn't a draw. It was a big mistake putting the belt on Howdy Doody. No one cared about him. Well, that's not true. That's either not remembering things correctly or jealousy, because Bob is a very humble guy. He doesn't go, "Yes, I did draw. I was the best." Bob's very logical and analytic. He's very Spock-like, and
Mm.
he says, at this particular moment in the match, the crowd, they lost it. So luckily, we can fact check. We can jump on the network or go to YouTube and check. He's right. He's not making any of this stuff up. I've seen a bunch of the matches where he says it was one of the loudest ovations I've ever heard in my life. Him against Morocco, him against Patterson, against the Sheik. He's not lying. Like, it really did fire people up. And Vince Sr., he kept telling everybody, it's important for me to have a hero, a pure all-American boy hero, and for the good guy to win at the end of the day. And when everyone was saying, but superstar Billy Graham, you'd make so much more money, Vince Sr. would tell people there are things more important than money. And that's why he went with Bruno for 7 years and then another 3, and Bob for 5 or 6. Because Vince Sr. was another guy like that. He was like, people need their heroes. All right. So it might be more profitable to be cool and BA, but that's not the legacy I want to leave. And now when I think of Vince Sr., which I never knew really much about him other than he was Vince's father, Bob paints such a beautiful picture of Vince Sr., a man of integrity, never made a contract because his word was his bond. He would never break his word. He would never break his bond no matter what. Promised Bob the belt 1 year before he gave it to him. And when the situation changed and Superstar was selling out the garden and it looked like, keep the belt on Superstar, make him a good guy, Vince McMahon Sr. said, I gave him my word. And everyone who said he made a mistake did not understand the value of a word, of a promise. So, yeah, that's why I really admire Vince Sr. now, because a little different from his son, who, went with, it seems like he would go with the good business decision. Vince Sr. was all about, make your heroes, give people something to look up to, be inspired by, so that, when times get tough, instead of shaking and losing your cool and not knowing how to cope, you get to stepping like Bob Backlund. You start doing that Harvard step test. 1, 2, 3.
I love it, man. When did you? What got you into wrestling to begin with? Just curious. What's your wrestling origin story, so to
I
speak?
I still vividly remember it. I was channel surfing and I saw the JYD on Saturday morning or Saturday noon wrestling. Junkyard Dog was beating some enhancement guy, and then after the match, he brought a bunch of kids in and he did that JYD dance
Yeah,
with all the kids. And I thought he was just this larger than life superhero. I had seen Spider Man on the cartoons. By that point, I would have seen probably G.I. Joe, Transformers, I believe. That was probably about 84, I think, around the time of WrestleMania, 85. But I just thought, man, that guy is incredible. He was a fun guy. He's everything I loved about 80s characters, whether comics or cartoon or whatever. JYD was the perfect representation in wrestling of all these characters because he was fun. He could have fun with the kids. He was like Mr. T. He was totally like Mr. T. He could have fun, but don't take him off because he got the equalizer, daddy. Like if you mess with the JYD, you're not going to have an easy day. I mean, he's going to eat your lunch because he's got the equalizer.
hmm
That's what I really loved about him, that he was fun and tough at the same time, and like an equal part. Like he could have fun and be gentle with kids, and at the same time, like Big John Studd was not going to mess with Junkyard Dog because even though JYD was smaller, he had the equalizer.
yeah. I love JYD. He'd come to the ring with another one bites the dust. They don't play that
Yes.
anymore, but that
And
they
then
do the
even when
dance with that, and
even when they changed the theme to grab them cakes, it was kind of
so
like
good.
a lateral. It was just as good.
It's good.
Yeah. Who was
Yeah.
your what was your introduction to wrestling?
So growing up, had a tough childhood, but I had amazing grandparents, and so I grew up in Texas. I'm in South Dakota now, in the shadows of Mount
Oh,
Rushmore. But I grew up in Texas until age 11. And so my grandparents, we called them Mama and Papa. I know in Canada you probably don't do that, but that was we say Mama and Papa. Well, Mama and Papa, my the idea of going to Disneyland for me as a little kid was spending the night with them. It was an oasis in the reality I was living in, and so I'd spend a weekend many times with them, and uh, I'd sit on their lap and watch. I remember as a little kid, not as a 11-year-old, but as a little kid, not yesterday. But I'd sit on their lap and we'd watch wrestling, and then we'd watch everything from WWF, which is now WWE, to NWA, to World Class Championship
oh,
Wrestling,
the fun
AWA. They
eras.
loved it. And here's the deal: they were living in the territory days in West Texas, and so they lived in what they called the Terry Funk territory.
Yeah.
And they went to the matches once a week. And in fact, they would tell me stories about matches that they saw, from the Funks to Harley Race. I mean, they had stories about Harley Race being the toughest guy they'd ever met. And here's one thing: is I remember when I saw Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase. They had vignettes for him, and I said, "Oh, who's this guy?" And my papa and would set me down. He was telling me about how he was there when the Million Dollar Man's dad passed away in the ring. They were actually sitting like second or third row, and so he was telling me these stories from like generations before me, and they were kind of passing this on. And I was sitting with them, and in our quality time, they'd tell me stories. We'd watch. They loved it. They got caught up in the soap opera of it all. My mama would just, I would have loved to have gone to a match with her because she would yell at the TV all the time. That Ric Flair is going to get his. She would say things like that. And
Yeah.
but they, it was them. It was I had no choice. I had to watch wrestling. And when I moved to South Dakota at age 11, I went from a place where a lot of people watched wrestling to where nobody did, and you were not allowed to talk about it. But I still liked it. And in fact, the older I get, the more I've kind of leaned into it, and especially the old stuff that I think I've gravitated towards, though, as we were talking about before, the things that I connected with were the larger than life characters. It wasn't necessarily how technical they were, although I did gain an appreciation for that. I love the Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah.
Obviously knows what he's doing. And I remember that Steamboat Savage match,
Yeah.
like the first time I saw it. And it's so, everybody talks about it now, but I remember that was the first time I thought, that was a good match. That's what a
Yeah.
good match looks like. But JYD is a great example where he didn't necessarily have good matches, but they understood it was about something bigger than that. And so that was a great example to use JYD. But I grew up with the Von Erichs, so
Yeah.
they were larger than
Oof.
life. I grew up loving Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. I remember his promos and being very inspired by that. Loved the Road Warriors, who are now the Legion
Oh,
of Doom. Um, so Hulk Hogan, I cannot leave him out. Uh, that's kind of a generic answer, but I mean, I was a huge Hulkamaniac. In fact, I got this picture in third grade. Um, I actually had a really good Christmas, came up to South Dakota for Christmas where my dad lived at the time. Still does, I guess. And they gave me like the best Christmas ever. And I have this picture in my hand here. I was going to show it to you. So this is me in third grade holding this 16-inch Hulk Hogan LJN with my Pac-Man pajamas.
wow.
And that
That's
thing right
awesome.
there was, I'd never had a figure, never had anything like that. I still have one in box now,
That
obviously.
one's huge. It's like
Yeah, you
we
can't play with it. It was a total display piece, but I guess what I did. I mean, I totally displayed it and put things around it, and I was uh, I was just so happy to have something, um, because a lot of the toys I had, I'd get a toy, and then due to the situations, I wouldn't have the toy for long because we'd end up leaving it behind. But that
yeah.
that thing right there, uh, Hulk Hogan kind of embodied that, and they meant for him to embody that larger than life. Had a code. Train, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. Later said, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, which I know looking back, I've watched it since then. It's not the greatest cartoon, but like I still like it because as a kid, that thing was legit, So,
They were right at home as cartoon characters, all of them. Andre and Junkyard Dog. Growing up in Texas must have been the best because, like, I think the two promised lands of wrestling are Canada and Texas. Even though Canada is not a state, it kind of you could condense it into a state when you're comparing it to all the talent that came out of Texas.
yeah,
I've watched some old world class stuff. We never had it up here back in the day, but in recent years I've been watching it. Love the Von Erichs. That's to me the biggest what if. Magnum TA is a big what if, but to me the biggest what if David Von Erich had lived, they would have been unstoppable because the three of them together. As big as the Freebirds were, as big as the New Day is today, the Von Erichs would have been 100 times bigger because they were brothers that were nothing like each other. I mean,
yeah,
they really were like X-Men, like
yeah,
they're bonded by blood, but nothing like each other. You had Kevin, the you know amazing aerial guy who's kind of quiet. He's the George Harrison of the group. I don't know. I just want to go out there and kick some butt.
and
Don't
barefoot.
barefoot. That's yeah. So he's kind of the really tough as nails nature boy. Even though Flair was the nature boy. Kevin was more of a nature boy, and to this day, living in Hawaii. And then you had Kerry, the rock star, charming, charisma coming out of every pore, amazing wrestler. Like his
Yeah.
matches with Flair, 84, 85,
His
spectacular.
discus, his discus punch, that side punch, that guy's a prototype for
Yeah.
what everybody wanted a wrestler to look like.
Yeah. And again, he had his own tragedies,
Yeah,
which he worked through a lot of them before, the tank finally, it ran on fumes for a while, but it wasn't until after his death that people found out dude was on one foot.
yeah,
And that made no sense. Like, but wait a second, the discus, how? How could he? How? The guy was superhuman. And then David he was Terry Funk. He was Dusty Rhodes. What could have been, he was the great technical worker who also understood how to get the biggest reaction out of the crowd. He could talk. He was the mouth of the
yeah,
trio. He was, I guess he was the closest to being like his dad, having all of the elements together, except, they say he didn't have the body of his brothers, but he would have. Like I know he would have because he knew the business well enough to know. I mean, even Terry Funk started doing his crunches in his 50s, right? I'm gonna get myself a six pack and
you
have.
egg sucking dog. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Terry Funk! I'm such a huge fan of him. So,
yeah,
yeah, like Texas would have been awesome. We got a little bit of Stampede here, across the nation, and what came after Stampede, the Canadian Wrestling Association or something. And the matches were always really intense, like Texas wrestling. Like they were in there almost like a shoot. The only difference was in Texas, you had the great promos. You egg sucking dog. In Canada, what you got was, let me tell you something. The next time I see you, you're going to get it, okay? You're going to get it. And I remember seeing it going, just get to the match. Because, when I go out there, I'm like, oh my Lord. Is there one Canadian out here who could cut a promo?
Oh yeah, we had the Freebirds, Michael
Oh,
Hayes, and I remember the Dingo Warrior, Ravishing Rick Rude, Percy Pringle, who became Paul Bearer, the Missing Link. I was totally terrified of, and Bruiser Brody. That guy, I thought that I was scared as a kid.
talk about
I've
larger
come
than life.
as an
Yeah.
older guy, and you learn about him, you come to appreciate um, what they did, and especially the ones that obviously took their job seriously. But it was fun times, man. When I watch those things today, it kind of transports me back, and it reminds me of just being with my mama and papa.
Yeah.
And they both have passed away since then. But it's kind of fun, when I watch wrestling today. I always tell people there are a few things I took away from them, amazing things, but wrestling is definitely one of them.
Hmm. Me too. Lots of great memories. Watching with my dad, and hearing similar stories. Like I remember my mom and dad telling me about seeing Gene Knitsky on TV and the Sheik. And when they would tell
Oh,
me, "Oh, the Sheik, oh, he's so brutal," and I go, "Yeah, that Iron Sheik, what a nasty guy." And they go, "No, no, not Iron Sheik, the Sheik." And I was a kid. I was like, "There's only one Sheik," and they go, "No, there was wrestling before this WWF stuff. It was on this other channel. It was just called wrestling, and there's this Sheik from Detroit. He's so bad. He's so bad." And then I would later learn they were talking about the Sheik, Farhat from Detroit, and yeah, the
hmm
brutal stuff that was going on there. You mentioned the Dingo Warrior, one of my all-time favorites, the Ultimate Warrior. To me, my pinnacle of wrestling. For a lot of people, it was Hogan versus Andre and the Slam in the Silverdome. But for me, the high point, the ultimate challenge, where Ultimate Warrior faced Hulk Hogan for the title in Sky Dome, that was it for me. That was Captain America versus Superman, or I guess more the Hulk or Wolverine, like this really tough rage beast.
Yeah.
But that was the ultimate for me. Not necessarily the best technical match. Best technical match is Flair Steamboat, the trilogy in '89 for me.
Yes. Absolutely.
Those three, good lord,
Yep.
that's the
No
high
argument
mark
here.
of working. And then more recent stuff too. There's been a lot of good recent stuff, but the
Oh yeah.
trilogy always comes to me. But for just sheer like irresistible force meeting the immovable object, which Gorilla always used that phrase. It could be Dusty Wolf versus Iron Mike Sharp, and he'd go, "It's the irresistible force meeting the immovable object,
If you
Jesse."
watch primetime wrestling, he would say that quite often, obviously attributed to WrestleMania 3 with Hogan Andre, but he would use it
Yeah.
in
It's a
everyday
main
life.
event anywhere in the country. I'm like, no, it's not. But Hogan Warrior for me was like the dream match. And I was so disappointed after that match that Warrior just relinquished the Intercontinental title. I was like, hey, this wasn't the deal. He was supposed to walk around and strap them both on him like a Spartan harness and defend them both and just be this beast who no one can get his belts now. But they just went, he'll get rid of one of the belts. But what was your like Hogan Warrior, your emotional high mark?
Well, so I would definitely have to say WrestleMania 3. I distinctly remember. I didn't watch it closed circuit. I had to watch it, I guess, months later when it came out on videotape. If you remember, you used to go to the video store.
Coliseum, yeah,
You're
Coliseum home
hoping
video.
nobody checked it out if they had it in. But I loved Saturday night's main event. Like that
Oh,
was,
the
I
best.
mean, that was awesome. So I distinctly remember the Saturday night main events of like Hogan and Orndorff with the blue steel cage. I want to say
Yes.
January of '87. Um, because it was shortly after that photo I shared of you. It was shortly after that, so my whole family stayed up to watch that with me. And then there was a battle royal one right leading up to WrestleMania 3, and that that to me blew my mind because Andre was the good guy, and for me to have him turn bad and hurt all the Hulkamaniacs, and at the same time I loved Roddy Piper too, and Roddy Piper was turning good, and he was
Yeah.
somehow in the midst of this, and Bobby the Brain Heenan, and you understand his brilliance now, but all of these characters like coming into one. Man, I loved WrestleMania 3. And obviously WrestleMania 6 was big for me. WrestleMania 5 with the Hogan Savage was probably, in my opinion, the best feud there ever was. That thing lasted a long time.
Yeah. Still
And
going, some say.
yeah, no kidding.
Oh, yeah, watching from above. Haven't forgotten what you said. Yeah, not even cold in the ground. Already talking bad about the Macho Man.
I love it, man. But then I think of just great matches and things I grew up with. I remember thinking WrestleMania 8. I remember the Savage Flair match and the Bret Hart Roddy Piper match being amazing matches.
Yeah.
And I was a teenager at that point. I think I invited a couple of friends over to my grandma's house to watch that, and I was enamored. I was frustrated that it wasn't Hogan Flair, but I did like Sid Justice. So at least at the time, I thought that guy's big, and I want to train to be like him. And
Sid annihilating people in the NWA was something to see. When he had the singlet and he was just spinning people and destroying them. He softened up the power bomb in WWF when he became Sid Justice, but in NWA he was trying to javelin people through the mat with his power bomb, and he was something else to see. Have you ever heard of Bret Hart's rating system? Promo, technical skill, and outfit.
Yeah. So, I think I read it in his book.
Yeah, so they're all out of 10, right? So you get a rating out of 10. I love Bret Hart, one of the best wrestlers ever.
Well, you are Canadian, so there.
Well, and that's actually why I started to like him when I found out this dude is from Calgary while he was in the Hart Foundation. I despised the Hart Foundation, especially when they beat the Bulldogs, my favorite team growing up. I can't believe they beat, and I hated the Hart Foundation. More for Jimmy Hart and Jim Neidhart. They were just so dastardly, and Bret was kind of the cool, quiet guy. I was like, I hate him because of association. When I found out he was from Calgary, I was like, a Canadian? So as a kid, I was cheering him because he was Canadian, but then I really appreciated his skill. And then, I went to see him at my local arena when he was wrestling Mr. Perfect and stuff, like losing a year straight, left and right, to Bad News Brown and everyone. I still thought, like, I love this guy. I don't care if he never wins a match. He's the best. So it blew my mind when he won the Intercontinental title. I was like, serious? And then when he won the world title, I thought it was dreaming. Like, I never expected this guy who lost 2-3 years straight to be the champion. So, I thought he was the best. But his rating system, as much as I love Bret Hart, I know that he has a very healthy idea of his own talent, right? He's not very bashful about saying, how good he was. So, I love how he rates himself. I forget what the actual numbers were, but it was something like, the look was really good. It was cool with the pink and black. It's 9, something like that. I don't remember the ratings, but it was pretty high. Technical skill, 10. And I'm like, yeah, can't argue with that. Obviously 10. And then he's like, promo, I did some good promos, especially Canada versus USA. I'm up there, 7 or 8. And I'm like, I don't know if you're that high, Bret. but with that rating system, I think it's the perfect all-round thing. We're talking about all-round. So I love the Ultimate Warrior. And he was pretty good technically. I don't think he gets as much credit as he deserves, because the matches I've seen, he was good at what he did. He never really botched a suplex. His clotheslines were incredible. Yeah, they hurt. That sucked for the people he might have been hurting, but that was all good. But in terms of technical skill, it would take a dip. And the promos I loved, but I recognize a lot of people didn't understand what he was saying, and maybe he didn't understand either sometime. But when I use that rating system, Savage is the perfect 30. And I can't think of another wrestler that's a perfect 30.
Probably not, because maybe some modern ones I think really try. Shawn Michaels would be close.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he'd be a 10 on promos, but what I loved, that rating system is great. I think there has to be some sort of X factor or intangible that you somehow believe in that person, whether they're the bad guy or the good guy, the face or the heel. So Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, I thought one of my all-time favorites. I think he believed he was really good, but
well, he was perfect. He
Yeah,
was
what
actually.
he was perfect at not being perfect. He can win that argument all day long.
Did
So
you ever,
there you go.
did you ever hear Bruce Pritchard's stories about those vignettes they did?
Yeah,
And he's like, I'm not sure if he was messing with us. He probably was because he was the master ribber. But he would sync like perfect swish every single time. They'd roll the cameras, nothing. Forget it. Never get it in. Bowling, perfect strike every time. Roll the cameras, gutter ball. So he must have been messing with them.
I don't know, or something, performance anxiety or
Camera
something.
shy.
But I think, I mean, it's a good rating system. I think when you look at what I think Steve Austin, for example, when he tapped into maybe who he
Yeah.
really was, and that's why we bought into him. There's a rating system, but I think there's something else that comes out in a character. And this is true of movies and television, cartoons, and everything else. But there has to be this thing that's true to who they are, and you believe in them, and you
Yeah.
believe in them that they're going to hurt you, or that you believe that they're going to save the day or get through the challenge. I think that if I was to adjust, Bret Hart's better scorer of wrestling than I am. By the way, he knows it. But I think there is something that, at least with Bret Hart, he did have believability.
Yeah.
I thought he was fantastic, and his promos, he would occasionally get really great. I mean, the U.S. Canada promos. I think when he was really hitting his stride and really believing what he was saying, and that passion was coming through. I mean, some of the best speakers I've ever heard just on a stage are not always the most technically proficient, but I sense and feel their passion that what they're saying is true and real, and I connect with that. And that's what I think a great wrestler or any character on television is, have the ability to connect. That's what you do really well, is you connect. You know that you're not just looking at a lens, you're looking at a human on the other side of that lens, and you're connecting. And helping people to feel something. And I think that when you talk about promos or even in your work and in your look, that's how you do it. But I have to
Thank
agree
you.
with you. If you're going to go by that strict scale, the Macho Man is where it's at.
I love Bret. I'm going to preface this and then follow it up by saying I love Bret to make that absolutely clear. I am
Do you love
surprised.
Bret?
I do love Bret.
Okay.
Bret is a real life hero.
Yeah.
Stroke survivor, the
Yeah.
recovery that he's made, not just from the stroke, but all of the other things that happened. With his brothers. The guy's lost multiple brothers, and he keeps walking on. He keeps getting up. He keeps Charlie Miking. He is not just a Canadian hero. He is a hero. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I'm surprised there wasn't a fourth criteria, Bret Hartness. And the fourth one would be Bret Hartness. I'd get a 10 for that. Hogan was okay, but I'd give him a 2 for Bret Hartness. But yeah, but I do love Bret Hart. To be clear, I really like that you bring that up, though. Terry Funk said that one time. I can't make you believe wrestling's real, but I can make you believe I'm real. And that
Bingo.
absolutely needs to be part of the criteria. Funk was one of them. Bret, great wrestler, awesome to watch, the Robert De Niro of wrestling. But I never, yeah, I believed what was happening in the match was real. I believed it was really affecting him the way he was selling. Ricky Steamboat too, but like in the way Terry Funk defines it, I think of guys like Kevin Owens. Like when I watch Kevin Owens, he can be on a card with all of these guys who do very choreographed, spectacular Cirque du Soleil type of moves, and they're really incredible. But they do this little skip, and I'm not, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone specifically here. That's not my deal right now. But sometimes I get the feeling that there's a certain routine. It looks like they've done it 1,000 times, so this is the part where I do this. And it might be a little bit of body language that gives that away. It might be a facial expression or a lack of facial expression, that this is part of the routine where we do this and that. Kevin Owens can be on that card and I go, this guy looks like this is the first fight, with this guy he's ever had. This doesn't seem rehearsed or choreographed. This guy looks like he's actually fighting for his life in here, just like Terry Funk, just like Dusty Rhodes. So there are certain wrestlers out there that really make it look like Roddy Piper was another huge one. When Piper walked out to the ring, every single time he looked like, I got to feed my family. This guy, he's trying to take food away from my little girl.
Yeah.
That's the difference between, a Roddy Piper and looking up at my LJN wrestlers, who would be a guy like a great wrestler, but not necessarily like a Bob Orton. I got an LJN Bob Orton standing behind Roddy Piper. Incredible technical wrestler, to the point of it being a travesty, a shame, because he was too good. He made it. Piper even told him one time, Bob, you make it look too easy, and no one appreciates you because you pick a guy up and slam him who's 300 pounds, and people go, it's fake, and they don't know how hard that was. Or you do a beautiful float over superplex, and people go, that's so choreographed, but you got to be incredible to pull it off like that. So I never watched Bob Orton and went, man, he makes me believe it's real. Bob, in his way, kind of made me believe it took a lot of training to be that good. Whereas like Terry Funk or Piper, every single time it felt like, I have no idea what we're going to see because he's in the moment. He's making this up as he goes along.
Yeah. That believability, I mean, it's a big factor. Great point on Kevin Owens. There's some, you're right. Modern wrestlers, I still love wrestling. It has a different appeal to me today than the old stuff, but I enjoy it for what it is. I especially, I admire them. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a wrestler, and I trained to be a wrestler. I trained like my upper body at least, to be, I'm 6'4", and I used to lift quite a bit. Then I went in the military and went into business, and the rest is history. But I look back, I think I have a lot of respect for anybody who does that line of work, because they do put their body on the line. But those who make it look like they're in for a fight, that nothing's choreographed, that every time they get in there, they're scrapping. Roddy Piper, not a technical wrestler by any means. He was so unorthodox, but you just felt like, and it was clunky sometimes, but you felt like he was doing everything he could to win the fight.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be in a contest, and I think the really good ones today, they do that. They're in a contest. That means they do whatever. That means their holds or their moves don't go perfectly, and they roll with that, because if you're going to be in a real confrontation, you're not going to be technically proficient.
Yeah. They don't do the move again if they botch it. Like that's the surefire killer that, hey man, that's not real. You wouldn't try it again, and this time your opponent cooperates a little bit better. There's nothing to be gained from redoing a botched move, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you go with it. You're right. I mean, there's a lot of choreographing going on, but listen, I mean, that's what the spots that they have to do. They have to get that skip to get that running start, to do that flip over the rope. And it's amazing what they do today. But I think I'm glad to see, like, I love AEW.
Me too. I was going to ask you if you've been watching it.
Oh, it's been amazing. I think Jericho's doing the best work of his life.
Yeah,
I was going to say, though, I was so happy to see them including the veterans in there. So they have Jake Roberts now in there, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard.
When Jake came out and got up on the ring, this is why people for decades have been saying the master of psychology.
Right.
He is another one that makes me believe it's real. He's going in there like it's the first time in years he's been in a ring. So what would I do? Smells the rope, feels the turnbuckle. It's holy ground. It's sacred. Yeah. All it took was a few seconds, but he just made that ring look sacred. And who has done that? In 40 years, I've never seen it done. But Jake the Snake Roberts did it, and it made me feel like he knows how precious this is, this opportunity, and how special this ring is. Jon Moxley is another one. His match with Kenny Omega, wow.
Those guys are amazing. Holy cow.
Insane. Yeah.
And I'm an old school guy. So for me to say those guys are amazing.
Because they've learned from the legends, right? I think those guys sat down and really studied. Moxley has Piper and Funk and Pillman all over his DNA.
Oh, absolutely.
He's picked from those guys to create his DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think it's good for that roster to have those veterans to learn from. And if they remain teachable, just like you and I, if we remain teachable from people who've gone before us and who are smarter than us, maybe even younger than us, but if we're teachable, we grow and learn. So when you have young wrestlers who do that as well from the veterans who are there, it's so wise, because Jake Roberts understands the value of story, like we talked about before, and he understands nuance. Arn Anderson does that too as the coach right now, and he puts the clipboard over his mouth when he's saying things. And, I mean, it's probably saying things to pop Cody Rhodes or whatever, but
Yeah.
the case is that you have them around to
Say
pass
something
that.
about old Dusty.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Your
Yeah,
your
your
dad could
daddy
put the
would have done
burgers
this.
away.
So AEW has been a breath of fresh air. I absolutely love what Chris Jericho is doing right now.
Le
I'm
champion.
That's a guy who's reinvented himself. He's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's fun, and I think it's made the WWE and others better with that competition. You instantly notice everybody stepping up their game, um, and really rising to the challenge. And obviously, for fans like you and I, the reason I grew up in wrestling where there was competition all over the place, and it made it wonderful and great. And now you're seeing that still happen. That evolution of whatever's next is happening because of the healthy competition.
It's a really interesting situation too, because it's, in the old days, there was so much cooperation. And reading Bob Backlund's book, you really get a sense of how much these territories cooperated with each other. It wasn't a war, like a lot of the toy wars. They were having wars with the other brands and stuff. The wrestling territories were cooperating with each other so much, not just the NWA sending their champion everywhere, but Vince Sr., Vince McMahon's father, was sending Bob to the NWA to wrestle Harley for the NWA title, and down to Florida to wrestle for Eddie Graham, all over the place, and trusting his champion, with these other guys. And that's why Bob was the champion. You know how tough Bob Backlund is when Harley Race says he was tough.
Yeah. No.
I mean, you ask any wrestler who's the toughest wrestler, you're going to hear Harley Race or Haku.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear Harley Race go, that guy was tough, daddy.
Yeah.
You'd say no more. And despite his happy-go-lucky Bob Backlund-ness, hard as nails, don't try him. So there was so much cooperation going on. And then Vince Jr. came along. Sorry, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. I know he hates being called Junior. Love you, Vince. So he came along and he started the whole war, the competition, raiding, so to speak, stealing talent and all that stuff. And I don't know if he genuinely was trying to put people out of business, but they went out of business. And that started the whole competitiveness with WCW, just all this competition. Now it feels like WWE is still doing that. It's a competition. It's a war. And Cody is over here going, we're just happy to do our thing here. He's so chill. You never get the sense from Cody or anyone at All Elite, we're going to put WWE out of business like Bischoff did. Right? Bischoff was famous for, I'm going to put McMahon out of business. I'm going to put him on the street. I'm going to starve him. Cody is just going, hey, can't we all just get along? Cody's trying to be an old territory guy, while Vince is still, I'm going to get him. And it's just weird to see the grace and the maturity of Cody, Tony Khan, and all of them who constantly do not take the bait. Anytime some sort of drama or war is potentially started by WWE, Cody and his boys always take the high road, or usually. I know there's going to be exceptions out there.
There are some, yeah.
But it just seems like, for the most part, Cody is just this enlightened individual, and Tony Khan, and they're like, that's not our modus operandi. And we're not going to stray from our vision. We're going to do what we want to do, and we're not going to stoop, to use Optimus Prime's mentality. We're not going to stoop to their level. And so that's what I really like about AEW. It just feels more grown up,
Well, teachability, if you're going to mature, just when we mature as people, we continue to grow, and growth means you're teachable. Well, I think obviously AEW has learned a lot from the previous companies that have tried to compete with WWE, and instead say, no, we're going to do our thing, stay in our lane. Now, there have been instances, I was thinking about the sledgehammer to the throne, those sort of things that Cody did that says, hey, game on sort of thing. At the same time, though,
it wasn't mean-spirited, though. I didn't take it as insulting.
I think it's a wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah. Like, hey, you're there. We know you're watching.
Yeah.
And you should. And because the best thing on WWE is NXT and what they have going on. And I really love what Triple H is doing. I would love to see him have more control maybe over some directions, because I think he's an excellent mind, and I have a lot of respect for him. but it's fun to watch as fans, which is what we are. And not to take it too seriously, but it's fun to watch these things happen. It's fun to watch people jumping from one to the
Yeah,
other.
absolutely.
It just harkens back to a time that um, we had those territory days, and now today it's more digital territory days. I think
Yeah,
NWA, which I've really enjoyed on the studio
it's
wrestling.
great.
I I don't get to watch as much. I'm super busy, so I don't get to watch everything all the time. But
And there's too
every once in
much
a while,
of it to watch it all, too.
yeah, I can't keep up with everything, but I do. There are some that I try to, hey, at least catch the highlights of, or at least NWA is a big one. I know Impact's doing a lot. I've never really gotten into ROH. I hear a lot about it, but I haven't watched that in probably over 10 years. Um, just time. And I
Yeah.
think that's where it's almost like, and I still like to watch the old stuff if I do get a free moment. Royal Rumble 1989, watch Haku and Harley Race go at it. You tell me that is a match. Those
Yeah.
are the two, you said, the two toughest guys that reminded me of just their match. That not a lot of high praise, but that was one where I thought, oh, that's real.
I'll have to check that out again. Another one, a forgotten gem that I saw recently, I think it was 1990 Royal Rumble, Ronnie Garvin versus Greg Valentine.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that was a match that should have just been Ronnie Garvin versus Greg Valentine. Who cares? By the end of that match, I was applauding. I literally sat there alone and I was like, someone needs to, like, oh, this is incredible. Like those guys, it wasn't just about hurting each other with the chops and stuff. They really drew me in, to a match that I really did not care about and
Right.
made everything matter, made everything intense, and I popped. Like at the end, I had that pop. I'm like, he won! Oh my god, that's amazing. Yeah, that was an awesome match. With AEW, like the difference between AEW and WWE is when the WWE, WWF, and WCW war was going on, they were both going on TV going, those other guys suck, right? They were doing the vignettes and stuff. They suck. They're both doing that. Where the big boys play, the other guys suck. And I just feel like the AEW, their vibe is not the competition sucks. You know, they're just they're doing what everyone should do. They're focusing on their own thing. They're staying in their own lane, and they're like, every minute we waste slagging the competition, we're taking time away from focusing on the Bucks and Omega and Hangman Page, and like you need to focus on your own thing and just don't worry about what's going on around you.
It's a great point. I think we live in a culture that wants to say either or. You're
Yeah,
either this or that,
yeah.
this or that. When it's
Nintendo or
really,
Sega. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
and both, not just either or. You can
Yeah,
have, as I remember in eighth grade, I went one week, I would like 90s hip hop. The next week, I would be all into the hair band. The next week, I'd be into grunge. The next week, I'd listen to Garth Brooks. And then I realized, and I would dress accordingly.
yeah,
And then I realized I can like all of them. I can like rock. I can like hip hop. I can like country. I can like all of those and still be the same person. I don't have to just either pick a lane and only like that. So I can like WWE and AEW
yeah.
and enjoy them. And they're different flavors of ice cream, but they're still ice cream. And I can enjoy them for what they are. And that's awesome. I wish the rest of us would understand that. And so if AEW does understand that they live in an and both scenario, not an either or scenario, then that's something you and I and the listeners can learn from, that we don't always have to either or everything. I mean, that's what I know. That's what makes headlines and creates controversy and makes the news, is everything's either this or that.
Yeah,
And I've
better than
often
this.
learned that many things can be true at the same time, that both and you can like both. They both can be awesome.
Yeah, you can like everything. You can weave. I think that's important for people to remember that you can weave from one brand to another. That's the basis of my whole collection, is that I didn't focus just on one toy line or two or three. I grabbed everything I could from my favorite days of Toys R Us, and everything. Wheeled Warriors are in here. You know, they weren't my favorite toy line growing up, but they need to be in here. They absolutely do, because it's not as strong. The sum is greater than its parts, type of thing. I wanted to ask you who some of your biggest heroes are from the '80s toys or cartoons.
So I'm looking around, and Mr. T,
Yeah.
as a TV show and the cartoon. I even have a cereal box over here with his face on it. I love it. I think Mr. T to this day remains a hero.
I beat
Sergeant
cancer,
Slaughter,
fool.
yeah, he did. He did beat cancer. I read his biography in middle school and how he grew up on the mean streets of Chicago, and I loved the A Team, and I thought he was amazing. Then he was in wrestling. He crossed over there, and then he had a cartoon on the USA Cartoon Express that I used to watch at my mama and papa's house on Sunday mornings, and I thought that guy's amazing. Another guy is Sergeant Slaughter. And
Sarge.
I've got this. Don't know if you can
Oh
see.
my
This
goodness.
is one of my prized possessions. The Hasbro Slaughter, LJN style.
Yeah, that is a pretty penny right there.
It is now. But I think that guy, what he represented, even in the storytelling when he turned bad,
He was
he's a
undercover.
redemption story too, and that's what a good story sometimes is. That we're not all perfect,
Yeah.
but Slaughter's story, he was before Sergeant Slaughter was just a bad guy. Then he was a bad guy, Sergeant Slaughter. Then became the American hero. Then bled into from my wrestling screen onto one of my favorite cartoons of all time, GI Joe.
Yeah.
And kicking Cobra butt. And I'm like, this guy's awesome. And then back into wrestling, and then turns into a bad guy. And I felt that I was mad at him because I'm very patriotic. And I'm like, Slaughter.
What a
go
lot
get
of
him,
people
Hogan.
don't realize is that was a secret mission that he was never allowed, to this day, not allowed to disclose the full details of. He wasn't an actual Iraqi sympathizer. He infiltrated.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got a good storyline with that now. As all good workers do.
Actually, I like The Lapsed Fan, I think it was. One of the wrestling podcasts talked about it. And they said, have you ever noticed that when he was that Iraqi sympathizer, he didn't act like old heel, like early 80s, late 70s heel Sergeant Slaughter. He was insane. And I never really picked up on that, but they brought the details out. They said, look in his eyes.
The crazy eyes.
Look at the slobber, like the actual drool. He is drooling. He's insane. He's had a psychotic break. And I never thought about it, but it's like that might be intentional. The way he justified doing what he did was because he lost his mind. He was temporarily insane. So it wasn't like a conscious decision of, I'm going to do this because this is how I feel in my heart. No, he lost his mind. And then when he came to his senses, I want my country back. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that was his way of making it okay to do what he did for as long as he did it.
Well, and there's still redemption. And I think that's a big part of it. And today, we don't even think I think he follows me on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah.
He
so
does that
cool.
occasionally. My little kid Jason was freaking out. I've got to meet amazing people in this life, but Sergeant Slaughter following me on Twitter I think I screenshotted it and said, this may not happen for much longer, but I got this now.
He followed me a while back, and that was pretty cool. Ric Flair followed me too, and then unfollowed me like a few weeks later, and I was like, all right, well, I guess to be the man, you got to follow them. I don't know.
But I also, I think like you, I saw in one of your videos, you talked a lot about Optimus Prime. So if we're going to say cartoons, Optimus Prime lived by a code. I love looking at his figure. I'm looking above my camera here because he's right there. And I think that's pretty cool. He-Man was a big one. What I loved about 80s cartoons, I know it's cheesy, corny, so am I. Brave Star being another one of those. When you watch those 80s cartoons and the main protagonist sharing a life lesson, and I think I still do that to this day. It's been a part of what I'm doing. But Brave Star, Brave Star I watched a little bit as a kid, but I didn't appreciate until much later what was going on with Brave Star, and it's one that most folks don't talk about. I know you're a fan, but first of all, he broke down all the barriers. A space cowboy from New Texas. He's a Native American. He also lives by a code. We'll do the right thing. And at the end of the story, we'll share a moral of the story.
Yeah.
And that was a Lou Scheimer thing from who also made He-Man. They would do that. And I know some of this was mandated because we know there's commercialism and all that going on. And these were just toy companies trying to sell toys. That might be true. But what's also true is they put people in charge and said, "Hey, will you create a series and create stories out of this?" So then you have the writers and you have the creators and developers making stories that said, "Here's what's right and wrong." That there is a right or wrong.
Yeah.
That here's how you act. Here's how you get through stuff and not just get scared of stuff. Here's how you face fear instead of run away from fear. Here's how you avoid danger instead of running right into it unnecessarily. Just whatever the lesson was. Don't smoke. Don't do drugs, which are always big in the 80s.
Be patient. Yeah.
Yeah. So I look at all of those kind of heroes, and that's what I appreciate to this day. Is watching that. And I wish my kids are older now. I wish I'd have showed them more of the cartoons I grew up with. I watched stuff with them. Sorry for my dogs barking, by the way.
No problem.
Someone's clearly at our door. And we have little yippy dogs. Battle cats, I guess.
Those were dingoes.
Yeah. So that's what I appreciate about the heroes of the story. But you also need good antagonists in order to make the hero overcome anything. And I thought Cobra Commander, Skeletor, Megatron, from the big three, obviously, Tex Hex, and I'm looking around Darth Vader even. Darth Vader is an amazing, the whole original Star Wars trilogy is really amazing storytelling.
Yeah.
And we find out that the reason that works is because it's based on really sound fundamentals of a hero's inner journey and a hero's outer journey. If you want to nerd out on story, there's some good stuff out there.
Sliders Star Wars reminds me of Sliders. Not that Star Wars was influenced by Sliders; it's the other way around. But because I've been watching a lot of Sliders, and the best stories are the what if you made a different decision. How could everything have been different based on one decision? Those are the best Sliders episodes, and that's what Star Wars is. Vader is Luke if Luke makes the wrong choice.
Yeah.
So it's not like in theory this could happen. It's in fact. It's in physical form. This is Luke if he makes the wrong choice. He will become Darth Vader. That's why that's so powerful. And like the danger is present. Luke, don't give in to the dark side. Maintain your grace. Don't stop being Luke Skywalker, because if you do, this tragic thing will happen that happened to your father.
And we watch it for entertainment, but now when we think through those kinds of things, the lesson for that is you and I are one decision away from changing the course of our lives.
Yeah.
All of us are. Everybody listening, we are only one decision away, for good or bad, because things don't really stay status quo. So it's a challenge to me when you say stuff like that is, what's that decision I need to make in order to level up and be the person I know I'm supposed to be? So we're very much inspired by these stories to perhaps do some evaluation of our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I really liked about Bravestar too, that he's a very similar character to He-Man, wise beyond his years. But what Bravestar had was, even though he had wisdom at a very young age, he wasn't infallible, and he still had a lot to learn. So he had some self-doubt, not to the level of Rodimus Prime, but sometimes he wouldn't get down on himself, but he would wonder, and he would really ponder. He would think deep and hard about what's the right decision to do here. And he could also learn. He would ask Shaman for advice. What's the right thing to do here? Things would weigh on him, and there aren't that many characters that would go through that. A lot of characters like Optimus Prime, they just had their set code, and the tough part was following the code, but they knew what to do. I know what I must do. Now the hard part, to do it. But Bravestar, he had a code too, but he was also learning along the way and helping other characters around him as well learn along the way. There was a great episode where him and 3030 have a tiff, and they both learn, what it means to be a true friend. So it wasn't just a case of Bravestar going, gosh, 30, you're so immature. Now I got to wait for you to come around, come to your senses. No, they were both like, yeah, we both kind of dropped the ball here, but yeah, let's move on.
A hero has to have room to grow,
yeah.
And forgiveness is a superpower.
Yeah, it is.
I really believe that. And you see that Bravestar is a great example. They have flashbacks to when he was a kid and was not behaving the way that he needs to behave now. Because that's true of any great stories. The character, the hero has to have room to grow. I always think of perhaps the greatest character transformation story of all time is A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
You have Scrooge, who begins one way and ends another, and what he has to go through to get there. And I think that's the element of great story, is not that the protagonist is perfect. It's that the protagonist learns, grows, keeps getting better. And to this day, I think, speaking of Scrooge, I love DuckTales. That's one of my
Yeah, I
all-time
was going to
favorite.
say Scrooge McDuck.
I mean, yeah, you could put your value in money or in that collection sitting behind you, or sitting in front of me. But what we know is there's something far greater than the thing and the object. And Scrooge McDuck and DuckTales constantly relearning that every day, as most of us do. We tend to forget the thing we already know, which is why we need reminders. And we're reminded that the value of a life and things like that matter more than anything. However, we have wonderful reminders around us of heroic tales and people or characters who understood the value of life. And we have even bad guys who represent trying to take that away. And that's true of life as we're seeing in these days, that there's things out there that may be working against life, but there are people out there who are working for life.
Yeah, that's such a good point. When I look at all this stuff, occasionally I'm asked about value. How much is this worth? How much is that worth? How much is the whole room worth? And I never really think about it. I never really dwell on it, because whatever the actual monetary value is, it's a drop in the bucket. It's minuscule compared to the value that I put on all the relationships that I've been able to make with it. So
Mm-hmm.
if I was just a dude sitting in a white room talking about how much I love He-Man and Optimus Prime, I probably would have still made a couple of really, really good friends. But I've made a couple more having this stuff that other people have had. And that's the truly amazing thing about this stuff, is that I can have something that you had, and not kind of like it, the exact production run. Mine might have even been made just a few hours after yours was made. It's the exact same age, same color, same look, style, everything. And that I value a lot, that I was able to use all of this stuff to make such amazing friendships, with people like Joseph and Sean and Eric and yourself and so many more, too many to name. But that's astounding to me that all of these friendships were formed with these things, just like when we were kids. Same deal as when you're kids. It was possible, a little harder though, to go and make friends with nothing. But if you saw a guy with a Sky Striker and you had a Rattler, a lot of great friendships started that way. Or, you have a Vamp and another person has a Slugger. I mean, you've got that common ground to start with, that language that we all speak, that really sparks the friendship.
Or you have a G.I. Joe lunchbox, and I wish I had one. But, one of the great definitions of a friend is, oh, you too?
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And for me, I just remember a little over a year ago getting ready to move. I had some of these things in totes, and I was telling my wife, well, should I sell these things? Or she goes, well, you don't display them. You don't do anything with them. So if you're not going to enjoy them, you should get rid of them. So I did a little YouTube search on how do people display these, because I picked these up over the years: garage sales, thrift stores, antique stores, eBay, things that I thought were cool, that I wanted to get for good value. And so a little over a year ago, I had to make a decision when we moved. Either I get rid of these, which is fine. I have a few things that I think are meaningful to me, but I'll get rid of them. Or if they're just going to sit in a closet, if I don't display them, then why do I have them? So that's where I found your channel, and I think I found your toy museum. I'm like, oh, there are people out there doing really cool stuff with this, and I look at it like art, and it is symbolic, and plus it makes me happy. I deal with a lot of serious things during the day, and dealing with massive challenges for our community and for business, for everything. But when I come in here, this is a fun place, and it helps me. And I think that's kind of equally when you're helping make things better in other areas of your life. You do need that space to say, this is fun, this is happy, this is this is great. And then you find people like yourself who are like, yeah, me too. And then I watch, and what's great about your videos is I'm not on YouTube, but I will lurk on YouTube every now and then and see those videos and say, I want to support this guy. This guy is doing great things, and um, and so that's what led me to do that. And you invited me on here, and us being able to talk about things we had in common. We grew up in two different places in similar times, and you find a kindred spirit.
Different territories.
Different territories, but you got the same soul, and
I'm
I
from
love
the Stu Hart area, and you're from the funk area, Terry
that.
Funk.
And still, you come together, and you have those
We're all
kindred
part of the
spirits,
National Toy Alliance. Yeah,
and they're all over, and they're listening to us right now.
yeah.
And so we're from all walks of life. I think for me, I've been blessed to be with my wife for over 20 years, to have raised two wonderful kids, have a son who's active duty in the Army now and overseas. I have, yeah, I'm very proud of him. Served in the Air Force myself. I've been a business executive. I've been an elected official. I've been a pastor. That probably explains why I go off sometimes the way I do. But all of these things I've been able to do in my life, and I'm so, so grateful. And I think when I look at the things that are in here now, I came from nothing, just so you know. As a kid, um, I love spending time with my mama and papa because my parents divorced early on, and I changed elementary schools 12 times. I've lived in crack houses and was homeless, and I didn't have a lot of things. And if I did get a He-Man or I did get a Transformer, we'd have to abandon a situation and move to the next, and I would lose them. I wouldn't have them anymore. And I think for part of me now that I'm an adult and extremely blessed and grateful, because when I look around here and I say, these are cool because for one, I got back what was lost at one time, but two, it's positive memories for me. And it reminds me of it takes me back in time in a way, but it also helps me remember, I got through a lot of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, Mike, have been through really tough times. People who are listening, maybe they're going through a tough time now, or they've been through some painful times. I know you have shared just some of your journey on your channel with regards to your injury and going through that. And I would just say that's what's tough times are a great teacher. And they show us and they do reveal character, just like the characters we've talked about today. Well, one thing you've done is rather than just feel sorry for yourself all the time, and we all sometimes want to do that, myself included, you've said, no, I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to use this for good. I'm going to take this thing that I'm interested in, and I'm going to share it with others and hopefully bring a little bit of joy. Well, looking at your YouTube count here, 40 something thousand subscribers have been brought joy because of you. And that's you turning, what you have and using it to share with others, even though you don't even have to leave your house, myself included. When I look at a childhood that may have been tough, I'm so grateful now because I think it's made me stronger and better and grateful. And gratitude is the key to joy. When you view everything as a gift, each one of those characters behind you is a gift. You're not owed any of that. I'm not owed any of this. But when we have it and it's this gift and we're so grateful for it and it brings joy, and that's where I look in here and I feel like Christmas morning every day. I come in my what I call my retro lounge / office, and you probably feel the same way. And I say, what a gift! I don't deserve any of this. Nobody owes me any of this. I'm grateful. I can lose it today. I would be okay because I have relationships and people who love me and who I love as well, and I have a greater purpose in my life. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy all these wonderful treasures and this little hobby that's been so much fun has allowed us to connect with people and really enjoy life. So sorry I went off there, but it
No,
is a
not at
gift. I'm
all.
very grateful, and I'm grateful for you and what you do with this channel.
I appreciate that. Attitude of gratitude makes all the difference.
Hmm.
Sometimes people ask me, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? And it's an attitude of gratitude. It's exactly what you just said. You're not owed anything. Um, the Clint Eastwood line from Unforgiven, when little Bill is on the ground, I don't deserve this, and Clint goes, deserve's got nothing to do with it. Deserve's got nothing to do with it. It's not about getting back what you feel you earned. It's about giving, paying forward, and looking at stuff like this, and not just going, it makes me happy. there needs to be something deep within you that goes, share,
Mm-hmm.
give, pay it forward. And that's how I started doing this. I created this for me, right? That's why I was putting it together. I wanted to do a massive, incredible toy collection that I could sit down and have that feeling when I was dealing, and I have dealt with some real sorry excuses for human beings. But instead of dwelling on them and just constantly thinking about them and getting more and more miserable, you learn from some people who make the wrong choice. You can watch other people who do that constantly, and you can watch them over the years. And the people who just constantly whine and complain, recite and repeat all of the injustices and shabby behavior, lack of grace and patience, if you watch them closely over the years, you will see it written on their face. You will hear it in their voice, and you'll just see a lack of joy because they're feeding that first wolf that I talked about in that last real talk I did. They're feeding the wolf of anger and jealousy and all the bad stuff. There's two wolves. You always have a choice, so you can feed the other wolf. And that's when I finally finished the room and sat down, it made me happy, but something inside me said, now give.
Mm.
It wasn't just about, well, I feel good now. Now I feel a little bit happier having to deal with that, piece of trash. No, instead of focusing on just me and being happy, I felt like, well, other people need to see this. I think people would appreciate this, and I'm so happy that it's made so many people happy. A trip down memory lane sparked some old memories,
Mm-hmm.
live brought to life some really cherished memories. I love seeing the stories of people remembering going to the toy store, getting something from a parent or a grandparent or someone else. That's I always love hearing that, and um, also because I want to, it's not just about you need to go and buy this stuff to be happy. That's an important thing for me. I'm not marketing this stuff. When I do a video on the GI Joe Mobile Command Center, I'm not saying now you need to go buy one. I'm trying to film that thing as well as possible and edit it and light it and give you a close look at every nook and cranny and show you how it moves so that you feel like you had it in your hands. That's my goal. Even if it's a new item and I'm showing it off, if you want to pick it up, if you want to add it to your collection, if you're able to, then go for it. But if you're not able to, I mean, that's my audience as well. It's not just focused on the one person who can buy it. It's also focused on the person who can't afford it. They might, have all the money going to support their family or supporting, good causes and stuff, but they could still feel satisfied that, I feel like it was in my hands. And that's why the Patreon tribe is so important, because I've been able to do so much more since I started, for the simple fact that microphones cost money, lights cost money, tripods, a computer, hard drive space, internet bill, electricity bill. There's going to be a very small but vocal and rude group of people who say, "Oh, all you want is money. That's all you get." Like, people are always hearing that. Anybody with any sort of crowdfunding will hear that occasionally, right? That's what you're driven. They don't understand reality because they don't have an attitude of gratitude. They don't understand. Look, it's like back in the old day. You know why there was a commercial every 7 minutes in a cartoon? It's because if the commercials weren't there, then that stuff doesn't exist, and you don't get to go and buy a Sky Striker or a USS Flag or Flint or Hawk. You don't get it because we're trying to do something fun here. Even Brave Star, with the Heart of Gold, Lou Scheimer behind it, had commercials
Yeah.
because it doesn't exist unless you fund it. Like this
You
stuff.
can't. A car can't go very far without fuel. And I
Exactly.
would say you brought up a good point. I think we all could learn from. Uh, Life isn't "I'm happy," period. Life is "I'm happy," comma. And the comma, what you do after the comma. And that's what you've done. You said, "I'm happy. I've got this amazing collection." And what I love is, even though I know you have a lot now, you don't buy a lot, I know these days, but your contentment shines through. That I'm happy. If this is all I ever have, I'm going to enjoy each and every one of these pieces. And what you did was you said, I'm happy, therefore I'm going to make others happy. And I think the challenge, for those who view this and may get value out of what you're doing for us is to say, that makes me happy. Therefore, perhaps I ought to share with him and say thank you. And this reciprocity that we all have goes a long way. But that's a great lesson in life as well. And I don't know about you, but I've learned that sharing brings more joy too.
Absolutely.
It's not, you don't always have to wait till you have joy to share joy. Sometimes sharing joy will bring joy to you.
It's
And yeah,
thanks to
go ahead.
empathy. Yeah.
Yes.
If you have empathy, other people's joy will be your joy. And I think the happiest people on the planet have an abundance of empathy, and the most miserable people on the planet have no empathy. I think it's as simple as that. I mean, you could go into a much deeper philosophical or psychological debate about empathy versus ego, but I think that's really the root of the issue when you see someone who's really miserable and they just are always like a lifetime of misery and they never really try anything different. It's because of a lack of empathy, because if you help someone and you make them happy, it makes you happy if you have empathy.
One of
But
the great one of this great quote from a book I read begins with, one of the greatest lies I ever had to contend with is this: life is a story about me. and and as someone who grew up watching a lot of 80s sitcoms, which I still love, I watch the Golden Girls all day long. Um, I used to kind of think, I wish I had a family like the ones I saw on TV. And so I kind of thought maybe I'm in my own sitcom and people are watching a story about me. That leads kind of down a tough road, because when you realize that actually what you're here to do is help other people be the hero in their story, um, whatever it is that you're doing, that they have a life that's just as valuable as yours. And so what can you do with where you're at to help people? Then now you're learning the true purpose of life. You mentioned empathy, because it's not always about us, it's about other people. In the process, when we love others, like when you love your wife and your wife loves you back, not because she has to, but because she gets to, and you love her back, not because you have to, but because you get to, and this is how love grows. We have the same thing with, our neighbor or our friends and family and just human race in general. It's really a beautiful and wonderful thing. And by the way, I know, I thought I'd just better say this before I forget it. Your real talks are like must see television for me. I mean, I can't watch everything you always post
appreciate it.
for time, but when I see that, I say, oh, that's appointment for me. I have to watch and see what Michael's going to say, because I know there's wisdom in there, that you're adding value to life. And it's kind of in your own way. And I don't know if you've ever described it this way. In your own way, it's kind of the moral of the stories after the end of He-Man and Brave Star and G.I. Joe and all of it. It's your way of saying, hey, here's all this fun stuff. Let's talk about, our favorite G.I. Joe characters. How do you get a USS Flag? Which, by the way, someday I hope to. I don't know where I would put it, but that's a holy grail for many of us. But you also use your platform for good, and you say, hey, here's some things to think about, or hey, here's where I've had struggles. Here's what I've learned, and I'm just sharing it. You doing that makes a world of difference, and it doesn't come across as preachy, which sometimes we all can do. It comes across as saying, hey, me too. And here's what I learned. I went down that road. I'm just sharing what I've learned. Here's what I've read. I'm sharing what I've read. I love that stuff, man. I love it. And maybe it comes from our 80s gooey, corny, cheesy cartoon stuff, but I love it. I think a lot of other folks, I bet you've received a lot of good feedback on those, because they're really impactful.
Appreciate that. I never thought about it that way, but I think you're right. There's something in me that every couple days or couple weeks just goes, bang out one of these real talks. It's, you don't have to be holding a Power Master Optimus Prime or a Castle Grayskull, but just talk about something that's on your mind. And it's not a hot topic or anything. It's actually a very cold topic. It's like it's a 2,000-year-old topic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why I do that, because He-Man and Brave Star ended with those absolutely wonderful moral of the story, very powerful things. There's like a supercut on YouTube where someone put them all together. If you want
Oh,
to feel good, you just put on one of those, and your heart will be full after watching that. It's just cheesy is not the right word, and I totally get when people call something cheesy because it's too wholesome, it's it's too saccharine, but it's the spirit of Lou Scheimer, especially when you watch those supercuts of all of the morals. His spirit lives on through those, and you'll just feel warm, and you'll feel loved and reassured, and okay with everything that's going on, even if it seems like there's chaos going all around you. It's a calm shield around you.
Yeah, and I'll take that over cynicism any day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, brother, I've had the best time talking to you.
It's been fun.
I feel good. I feel so good. Thank you so much. I feel warm and fuzzy. You are
Back at you.
You're such an inspiration. I've really appreciated your time today, and I'm glad we got to share it with the tribe out there. So hope everyone
Absolutely.
else out there really enjoyed it too. Yeah, I look forward to more chats with you in the future.
No doubt about it, man. You got a friend, and keep up the great work. Thank you for inviting me on today. It's been fun. I know we talked pretty philosophical today, but I tend to do that. Sorry
favorite.
about that.
No, there's nothing to apologize. That's another one of my, either if I haven't done it or I will, nothing to apologize for. We need to stop apologizing for things that we're not sorry for and we shouldn't be sorry for. And, what's going on today, there are positives to it. So once again, which wolf are we going to feed? Are we going to just look at the news and look at all the bad news that's going on? Or are we going to give the white wolf a little bit of kibble too? And are we going to go, hey, this is making me go outside and get some fresh air, not too far from the house, and a safe distance from everyone else, but it's making me get that sunshine that, I'm always told to go get. It's making me put the phone down and focus on something else, maybe read a book or spend time with family. It's letting me spend time with my family all day because I'm getting to work from home. One of the things I dealt with now for years is the whole issue of work from home, or not necessarily specifically from home, but work remotely. And that's been the issue. No, can't work remotely. Why not? Because it's not ideal. Well, it's pretty funny that this thing came along because it's showing that everyone can work remotely, work from home. No, it's not ideal, but it is effective. And this whole concept of ideal is just so silly now. It just seems so spoiled, entitled, and silly that now that we have to do it, we're doing it, and we're doing an awesome job at it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man, keep being a force for good. I encourage everybody out there, be a force for good wherever you are. That's what we need now more than ever. And that's what you are. So thank you for all you're doing. And yeah.
Appreciate it. You fun. Too, man. Keep fighting the good fight every moment, every day.
Yes, sir.
Much appreciated, good brother. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. Hope you're all safe, happy, staying positive, stay strong. We'll get through it. Namaste, everyone.
Do what's right, and you can't go wrong.